welcome to the Covert Access Team podcast. I'm joined today by the one and only Patrick Laverty, and it's a pleasure to have you on. So some people who listen to this may not actually know who you are, as surprising as that is, but could you do a quick little tell us about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm really happy to be here. And it's always interesting to reverse the roles here as you have been on my podcast. So, yeah, my name is Patrick. I'm a pen tester where I get to do all different types of pen tests in my job for Compass CyberGuard, which do include social engineering, covert entry types of tests. But I also run the Layer 8 conference and podcast, which is the podcast that I was referring to that Brian has been on before.
I have. That was a really good experience. And for anybody listening, I encourage you to go listen to that because it was a lot of fun.
I definitely encourage people to go listen to Brian's episode and any of the others where we've had more than 130 episodes on there with all kinds of people talking about social engineering and OSINT topics.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's a really, really good podcast. I listen to it. I mean, again, for what I do, for what you do, social engineering is really important, and for what everybody does. I mean, everything from sale. I mean, basically, if you deal with people, social engineering is valuable to you. So it's a really good podcast to listen to.
And that's exactly one of the things that I try to get out to people too, is that all too often we think of social engineering only in the IT and security space, where when you really start looking at it, and I've described this multiple times, is learning social engineering is really about learning communication skills and learning communication styles, which again, like you just said, and there's so many other industries, you go to a restaurant, that server that comes up to you is they're doing social engineering. They're building rapport with you. You go buy a car, and I use this example a lot. All too often, I go in to buy a car, and one of the first things that they'll notice, maybe I'm wearing a hat of the local sports team, and all of a sudden, they too are a fan of that local sports team. So they're building all these different rapport methods, and people can even use these types of things just in their everyday life in terms of being a better communicator with other people around them and learning how other people communicate. So, yeah, social engineering is such a big and important topic.
Yep, it absolutely is. I mean, the thing is that you mentioned some great examples, but even something as simple as getting a job, getting a promotion, dealing with relationships, dealing with conflict in relationships, like every aspect of it, it is super super important. One of the things that I tell people when they ask about how do you get into black teaming, physical pen testing, all that, is I say, look, lock picking, alarm bypassing, all of this, it's optional. It's good to have. It's the icing on the cake. But if you can't social engineer, if you can't specifically with the escape clause, like how do you get out of a bad situation, then that is the one non-negotiable skill that you have to have. But yeah, so I mean, like if you're breaking into a building and you cannot talk your way out of a bad situation, then you get one shot. That's it. You get burned, game over. But if you can talk your way out of things, then it doesn't matter. Let me say it this way: if you have such honeyed words that you can talk your way out of literally anything, it doesn't matter if the alarm goes off. It doesn't matter if somebody catches you, because if you can talk your way out of it, who cares? So, I mean, social engineering is just absolutely. Anyway, I think both of us could go on about social engineering all day.
This is true.
So, so you mentioned getting into social engineering. How did you get into it?
That's probably one of the most common questions that I get, especially when I go around to conferences and give presentations on it. People come up, how do I do what you do? And it's really interesting because there aren't a lot of great ways to fall into it. There aren't a lot of great ways to do the training for it. I know Covert Access Team offers training for parts of this, but there also are not a lot of jobs out there saying, hey, we're looking for somebody to break into buildings. That's not really something that you can find. So I went through the typical path where first, before being a penetration tester, I was a web application developer where I built web applications at a university for about 13 years. And when you're doing that, you also get to do some kind of system administration. And then I fell into the penetration testing where a company invited me to come in and work a little bit on the side doing web application pen testing. And once you're in with a penetration testing company, they also usually do offer social engineering types of engagements. And one of the things that I've always tried to do in my career is that I look around for where the gaps are. One of the things that I've often seen is that people who do pen testing, especially web applications, network testing, they don't really like to do the phone calls. They don't really like to do the phishing so much. There's a few of them that love to do the covert entry, the black team, the break-ins, all that kind of stuff. But they don't. I've actually even heard from some of them that phishing and phone calls is not real pen testing, which just drives me crazy. And the reason that that drives me crazy is that in my mind, social engineering in these ways is actually harder than
Mm,
network pen testing. Because if you put one of these people in front of, let's say, a Windows 2019 server at a certain patch level, it's going to behave a certain way 100% of the time. If you put them in front of another Windows 2019 server with that same
mm,
patch level, it's going to
mm,
behave the exact same way as the other one did. However, find me two people in the entire world who are going to act the exact same way at all times. It does not exist. And this is what makes social engineering so much different and, in my mind, harder than the network pen testing, where we have to be ready for that and we have to be willing to think our ways around that. So it's kind of a long-winded answer to your
mm,
question about how I fell into it. Is I
mm.
found these gaps. I saw that people didn't want to do the phishing and the vishing, so I started with doing those, and then eventually gradually got invited to do some of the on-site covert entry types of testing.
That, first off, that's awesome, and that is a very normal path that a lot of people take, from starting off with basically some type of the development side of things, then getting into the offensive side of things, and then yeah, that's really good. And it's funny because you mentioned about how there's no two human beings on Earth who are going to react the exact same way. You don't even react the same way. Like if I ask you a question, or how's it going at 8 a.m. before you've had your morning coffee, you're not the same guy that you are at noon, or 5 minutes after you get off work. It's like even you are going to be different. So you're absolutely right, and nobody is the same way. And like yeah, that's one of the things when people ask me, I always include tailgating into social engineering, and they're like, it's not social engineering. It's like, oh yeah, it is. Try going in when you're smelling like a hobo or something. Like they'll immediately turn around and say you can't come in.
Yeah, what reason are you going to be tailgating that person?
Right.
Either you're going to get somebody that you're tailgating that is untrained or doesn't care, and they're going to let you do it, or you're going to get somebody that turns around and says, "Where's your badge?" And
Yep.
you need to have an answer for that, or like you described, your exit clause. You're
Yep.
out.
Yep. Absolutely. So, all right. So, Patrick, you're running. This is something that I'm really excited about, but you're running a conference soon. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. This is the Layer 8 conference. It's going to be the fifth time that we've run this. Way back, my history is that I like to help out in the community. And when I was first starting out, I got an internship with Security Weekly, Paul
Mm,
Asadorian, working with him. And I remember during my internship with Paul, at one point, he said, let's create a conference. So we did a B-Sides Rhode Island conference, I think way back in, I don't know, it might have been 2013 or something like that. So I really got interested in running conferences, and we went on, had a really successful one there. I got involved with B-Sides Boston, running that
mm,
conference as well. And one of the really amazing things about B-Sides conferences is they are so well respected in the
mm,
community that when you run one of those, everybody's heard of it. You have
mm.
immediate credibility when you run one
Yeah.
of those. Sponsors, they know who you are, and they all want to help. So I did that for a few years, and then I decided I would really love to have a challenge where nobody's ever heard of this before, where I have to build something from the ground up. And I
Yeah.
took some time to think, well, I don't want to create just another conference. There's lots of those out there, and they're all great in what they do. But then I kind of figured out there really isn't a conference that is solely focused on social engineering. This was back in 2018. I said, why not do that? So I put that on in 2018 and created the first ever conference that just focused on social engineering. Built that from the ground up. That was so much fun. Had about 125 people that joined that out in Newport, Rhode Island. Did it again in 2019 in Providence. Had about 300 people that attended there, and then the world imploded. So we had to go completely online in 2020, 21. We did a virtual conference, and people got completely sick of those. So we've laid low for a couple of years. Now we're trying to make the big comeback. we're trying to bring back the Layer 8 conference, which also now includes OSINT, which is such a huge part of social engineering. I know you always talk about doing your OSINT and your preparation. So we put those two pieces together. Now I like to say it is the only, or it is actually the first conference that solely focuses on social engineering and OSINT topics. It's going to be the fifth time we're having it on June 14th, a Saturday in Boston. Two tracks. Going to be an amazing day with just so many great speakers, keynotes, training options, all kinds of great stuff happening.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, okay, so June 14th, that's actually really soon. Can people still get tickets and attend?
Absolutely. I'd love to have more people attend. There's really no limit. If we got so much space there, we got a couple hundred people already signed up, but we'd really like to have more. One of the things that the great feedback that we've always gotten in the past is that due to its relative small size, like I said, we got a couple hundred people. There were like 300 people that attended in 2019, but it's not like a DEF CON 30,000 people size where you can kind of get lost in the crowds. The other really interesting thing about this, where it is just focused on those two topics. So pretty much everybody else there has an at least interest, if not expertise, in the area that you do if you're an attendee. You attend a B-Sides, a DEF CON, one of those types of things. Maybe you're a web application person meeting with somebody that likes to do hardware. You might not have a whole lot to talk about there. Now at Layer 8, you show up, you do OSINT, you do social engineering. Probably everybody else that you interact with there is going to have the same interests or expertise. So the feedback that we get is it's a really great environment for people who are interested in that kind of thing. They make so many great connections. And that's one of the things that, like you already asked, how do I get into this field? This is how you get into it. You attend a conference like Layer 8, and that way at some point you're going to have all these great contacts that you've done the networking on, all these people, or even when you get back to the office and 6 months later, somebody says like, hey, how do we do this? We need to do this OSINT investigation on this area. And you're like, oh, I remember at Layer 8, I met this person who does exactly that. Let me ask them for some of those types of ideas. And that's where you can start building up your background and your network by attending this type of conference.
That's actually a fantastic point. People are always asking, how do you get into this field or that field? And people always or often seem to shun or just not really think about the networking side of things. Like a lot of people, the amount of people that I've helped or who've contacted me and said, "Well, I just got out of college. I didn't do any projects. I didn't do any internships. I've never gone to a conference before, but for some reason I can't get a job at Google." Right? They don't seem to understand that networking and so like socializing and all these kinds of things, external things, they're really, really important to do. And I mean, so out of curiosity, who are some of the people who are going to be there, talking and running talks and other things at the conference?
That's a great question. So our two keynotes that we are going to have, we're going to have one keynote in each track. So we got one track of OSINT, one track of social engineering. In our OSINT track, we're going to have Ray Baker. Ray is an amazing OSINT person. She has really come onto the scene as a person that focuses hugely on maritime OSINT. She's done a lot of work in that area, and she literally wrote the book on OSINT. It's her book called Deep Dive, which we're going to have a book signing with her during the conference as well. So she also co-founded Case Scenarios, which is a training company on OSINT. So Ray Baker is going to be one of those speakers that we have there. And then on the social engineering side, we're going to have Aleth Dennis, where I think if you don't know name, you might remember who she was or who she is. Aleth was one of the winners of the DEF CON Black Badge Social Engineering Capture the Flag competition, and she accepted her badge on the DEF CON stage while holding her newborn baby a few years ago. So she is an amazing social engineer. So Ray and Aleth are going to be our keynote speakers, but we also have people like Ritu Gill, who is the president of Osmosis. We have Cynthia Hetherington, who is also the creator of Osmosis. Some of the other people, a lot of the ones that have appeared on the Layer 8 podcast, we got Rebecca Markwick, who's coming in from England to talk about red teaming and Are We the Baddies, where she's really going to be talking about Are we doing our phishing training wrong? This whole attitude of, when we do these tests and just trying to, with the gotcha, is that all wrong? And is there a better way to do these types of things? Uh, Another fun one that seems that we're going to be having is Jordan Bonagura talking about how social engineering shaped his marriage. So there's a whole bunch of topics all the way across the board with just an amazing lineup of speakers that people have probably seen at other places. And one of
Mhm.
the other things that I really pride the conference on is that we do like to get speakers that you might not have heard of, or this might even be their first time presenting. I know back in 2019, one of the most popular speakers that we had was a high school student who did all of his own research. He did all his research into an OSINT topic, presented that at the conference, and of course, I was a little bit concerned, like, well, let's see how this goes. But the feedback that we got was he gave one of the best presentations, and he just explodes in the scene. So we love to have all different types of speakers at the conference.
That's fantastic. And I mean, again, like if you're looking to get into this, going to conferences, socializing, meeting people, it's a fantastic way of doing it. You had mentioned that one of your speakers had gone to DEF CON and gotten a black badge for social engineering. For those who don't know what that is, which is understandable because it's one of the few talks that isn't actually televised, what is that? And why is it
Oh,
impressive?
yes. So at DEF CON, they either have had or still have, I'm not sure which, villages, which are like mini conferences at DEF CON. And sometimes at those villages, they can have different capture the flag competitions. And in the social engineering one, they had one where people would apply in advance and get accepted, and they would be given a specific target that they had to do the OSINT on and write a whole report about. But then once DEF CON happened, there would be a sound booth that they had to go into and make phone calls. I think they had 20 minutes to make phone calls to their specific target. And what they were needed to do at that point was to obtain information or flags from those companies. And Alif Dennis won that competition one year by getting the most flags, getting the most points, just by making phone calls to her target. Some of the things that they might have had to get included, like, what is the badge type that you use at your company? Who are some of the vendors that you use? Who is the HVAC company? Who's your trash company? And how about this URL? Can I get you to go to this URL to test out your internet? All of these are types of the typical flags that they get, and they ask people to go to over the phone, get all these points. And Alith was the one that won it one year, so she's going to be the speaker there.
Okay, so for anybody listening to this, genuinely put yourself in those shoes, right? Like like imagine that you call up Google, Microsoft, Apple, whoever, and within 20 minutes, you have to get somebody on the other end of that phone who doesn't know who you are to answer all of those questions. And as you mentioned, she does this while she's carrying a newborn baby. So I mean, she's literally multitasking, right? So she is a very, very impressive person when it comes to social engineering, and rightfully so.
And
Um,
at the same time, you're competing against other people who are doing the exact same thing to other companies. So it's not like you can learn from other calls on the
right.
your own target. They're trying to do it against their own. So there's lots of people at the competition that are doing the same types of things, and Alith was the most successful in her year.
Have you ever considered doing it?
I did. I was considering doing it. Um, I think it might have changed in a way that I don't know that I'll do it in the future.
Mm, okay,
Um, Plus, I do it in my job all the time. So
true.
yeah, it's one of those things where you do it, you don't really feel like you, you want to go to a conference and do more of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, especially if you're doing it for your full time job anyway, it's just more work.
That's right.
So actually, that begs the question. So, do you want the Layer 8 conference to kind of become the next DEF CON? Do you see it into the future? Do you see it like kind of expanding out and having all these villages and all these like CTFs and everything else?
I'm totally open to change. I'm totally open to whatever direction that the Layer 8 conference could go into. I do like keeping it relatively small. Uh, One of the really nice things is that it does seem like people come away from the conference feeling as though that they have met a good number of people, that it does feel welcoming. that it feels like a place that they want to be. So I don't really want it to get too huge. If there are other things that we could add, that would certainly be as well in order for the conference to have.
So, do you think that with between social engineering and OSINT, I mean, this is honestly a very the amount of thing. Well, I'll say it this way: the amount of things, the amount of damage that you could do to a company just through those two things alone, OSINT and social engineering, is actually very like a lot. It's a lot more than people think. And for anybody who is questioning this, think about how many times your company has run phishing campaigns on their own employees, and then ask why do they do that? Why is my company every month, every other month, running phishing campaigns? And it's like, well, it's because they want to make sure you're not going to click on stupid stuff. But the one thing that most companies don't add when they run phishing campaigns is they don't add a social engineering aspect against their own people. And I can tell you from having done that, I have on multiple occasions ran social engineering campaigns against people, try to get them to, plug in flash drives or, click on links or anything else. It is wildly successful if you're good at it and you know what to do. I can't say exactly how this was done, but there was one instance where we did I think it was four, let's call them locations that were all high security, and we were able to, what was it? It was 63% of the time get people to plug in a USB flash drive into their work laptop, walk it inside, and do it just through a little bit of manipulation. So this kind of thing is really, really important, not just for your personal life, social engineering and all that, but also just every aspect of things. Like, I mean, being able to, log into Google, log into wherever, and actually learn stuff about somebody, learn something about a company. Is this person credible? Especially in the age of AI, when you don't really know what's real anymore. If somebody on LinkedIn, contacts you and says, "Oh, hey, I'm a recruiter at Google. I want you to, apply for this job. Why don't you send me some information and get on this call with me?" And other things. They can be social engineering you just like you're social engineering them. What is that's actually something that I wanted to ask you about. How do you see AI affecting social engineering going into the future?
Oh, I love this question now because we always see now that people love to build up what is the latest thing. And we need to be all worried about what is the latest thing. And of course, there's always new products and defenses and everything against the latest thing. And of course, right now, AI is the latest thing. So, what we're really seeing is that AI is going to make social engineering so much better. It's going to make social engineering so much harder to defend against. And of course, some of this is going to be FUD that we refer to, or fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which, of course, we always hate seeing the FUD, and it's out there everywhere. So one of the things that I'm like, I always say that there's the same way to defend against all social engineering. I give presentations on social engineering, and I always throw out this challenge: explain for me a social engineering attack that this defense cannot stop. And I always tell people it's my two V's: it's the verification and validation. If you verify and validate the information that you are presented during a social engineering attack, you can defeat every social engineering. So basically, what that means is you need to do some kinds of out of band checks to validate the information that you're being given, to verify the people that are asking you. And in my mind, AI does not change this. So way back, if you go even to let's say the old Nigerian prince scam, if you do any kind of checking into that, you can see that that is not real. And I always tell people it's the exact same thing. You get the phishing email that seems legitimate. It seems like it's the CEO asking you to do something. Well, out of band, go contact the CEO's office and see if that is something that is legitimate. You get a phone call from somebody who sounds exactly like your boss and is asking you to go get those gift cards. Well, just tell the boss, okay, I'm going to hang up right now, and then call your boss back at their actual number. Same thing with people that are in person. You find somebody in the building that doesn't seem like they're supposed to be there. You can ask them, where's your badge? You don't have a badge? Well, let's go get you a badge. Walk them back to the security. So I always tell people that this verification and validation are the things that can defeat every social engineering attack. And the only thing that AI is really doing is really just making the pretext better. but it's not changing what we need to do to defend against them. So that's really what I'm trying to push out to people is the defenses have not changed. We just need to do our verification and validation of the information that we're given, and AI is not changing that.
It's funny. There's so many things that I want to ask you about what you just said, but that does beg the question: how do you resolve that? So I was doing a hiring round for a young person a little while ago, and they kind of expected me when we got to social engineering to ask them a question of how would you social engineer this person, and I guess I threw them for a loop when I asked them, I don't want you to tell me how you would social engineer this person. I want you to tell me how you would stop it. How do you resolve like something like tailgating? How do you resolve it? How do you resolve like various social and phishing attacks? All these kinds of things. How do you fix it? So, in your opinion, how do you resolve these things?
Yeah, for me, this is really going to be where we are falling into our training. So, training and testing, I know that we all probably hate the training that we get, especially when the testing comes in. But one of the things that I often like to ask people who complain about the training and the testing is like, well, do you remember when you were in the fourth grade and your teacher taught you the multiplication tables? So, what what how would the teacher know about how well that you have absorbed the information if they didn't test you on it? And the other thing to think about with that is, I referenced the gotcha earlier. So imagine that you have only ever learned addition and subtraction. And now one day the teacher says, well, I'm going to test you on multiplication. Is that fair? That's absolutely not fair to test somebody on multiplication if they only know addition and subtraction. And what that is really going to be similar to is whether people have had the proper training on how to recognize and understand the social engineering and to also test them at the appropriate level in a fair way. So those are the types of things that we really need to do. We need to continue with the training and we need to continue with the fair testing in a positive way. So those are some of the directions that I really like to go with that.
That makes a lot of sense. So could you tell me like when you say that you're going to test the staff, I suppose, what does that look like? Like is it like a phishing campaign like type of thing, but more social engineering, or what exactly is that?
Yeah, I think we need to do those types of things in all the different areas at various times. And one of the things that I really like to do is for me, I don't really care metrics about people, whether they click on it, whether they enter information, anything like that. For me, the metric that I truly care about is whether they are going to report it. Because the story that I also, or the analogy that I like to give is, let's say let's imagine that you're in a boat and with about 10 other people. All 10 people have their own room. Now you go back to your room and you see there's a hole in the floor of your boat. And you figure, well, I'm just going to plug up that hole. I'm all good now. No worries. Except everybody else on the boat also has a hole in their floor. If you don't tell people, like, go check your room, there might be a hole in the floor, we're all going down. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with phishing, with phone calls. If we don't report it, if we don't tell others about it, if we don't blast it out throughout the company, and maybe you don't do that, maybe you just let the SOC do that. That's what they are there for. That's what your security team is there for, is to really look into it, see if it's a problem, and to notify everybody. So when this type of testing is happening, what I truly care about in the metrics is the reporting. When they say, oh, I get this kind of click rate, I don't care. And to me, that's it. The best possible thing that we can get is people that do not click and report it. But to me, if you click on it and report it, that's still okay. I'm not going to get upset about that. I want to know about that. And we're going to do the same types of things, phone calls, people testing in person, anything like that as well. So that's also another segue into one of the things that I'm also trying to change. We often hear about security awareness training. And I'm trying to change that from security awareness training to maybe security response training or security action training. Because let's look at it this way. If your house is on fire, do you want somebody going, my house is on fire? I'm aware of that. Or do you want somebody responding to that and calling the fire department to come and put the fire out? So instead of making people aware of security issues, let's teach people how to actually respond and do something about it.
It's funny that you said that. A few months back, I was running an audit for a relatively large company, and during the audit, we had discovered that In one physical year, there had been 19 instances where employees had contacted somebody like the facility manager or somebody and said, "Hey, we saw something that seemed off. Somebody walking through the office or somebody, loitering out back or just random things." But not once did the company ever take action on it. Like it was all reported and it was all documented, but they had that part. But the company themselves never took anything seriously. And I asked them why, and they said, well, because the people weren't in important places. They weren't in like the server room. So when you said something like, well, we saw the same guy. There was one instance where they said we saw the same guy come into the lobby every morning and just kind of mill about for like 20, 30 minutes and then leave. And he did that every day for 2 weeks. And a couple employees reported him, but nobody did anything because they said, well, but he's not in a secure area. So why do we care?
And we care because that's you. That's me. We're there. We're building rapport so that we are just that guy who's always here. And maybe we go around to another door and try to tailgate our way in, and somebody's like, "Yeah, that's the guy that's always here. So he's supposed to be here." So yeah, that's definitely a problem, and that's something that the company needs to act on.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, okay, so people who listen to this almost assuredly have an interest in social engineering. From your perspective, what would you say is the first skill a novice social engineer should work on? What's the first thing they should learn how to do?
Get uncomfortable. So I think one of the things that we really need to do is to be okay with being uncomfortable, because I think you can probably agree that there are going to be social engineering, covert entry types of engagements where it's going to be uncomfortable, where you're going to be in a situation where you're like, uh oh, something's, this isn't going exactly to plan. And you need to be able to communicate. So, one of the things that I often tell people who say that they want to get into social engineering, that they want to get started, go have conversations with people. Go talk to people that you've never met before, and make sure it's somebody who isn't required to speak to you, who isn't paid to speak to you. Something like a bartender, or, the hotel front desk staff. Those are people that they have to talk to you. So go talk to somebody, have a conversation with somebody that is just out there. Maybe it's somebody you walk up to on the street. Maybe it's somebody in the grocery store. Or I think the little light went on for me one time when I was picking up my dinner at a restaurant. Was doing the takeout, and as I was getting ready to sign the receipt to take the food, I can see that the woman working behind the counter, she's looking up at the TV that's in the restaurant, and she mentions there was a commercial for a Jeep on there. She's like, "Those are really nice Jeeps." And normally I would just be like, uh-huh, and sign my receipt and move on. I'm like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to practice my social engineering. I began a conversation with her. I'm like, is that really a nice Jeep? Is that the type of Jeep that you would like to get one day? And she's like, yeah, that's a really nice one. There's these other models that I don't remember exactly what she said. And I was like, what would you do with that kind of Jeep? Is that something that you can do off-roading with? She's like, yeah, I really like to do those. My boyfriend and I, we go and we ride, sometimes off-road, we go through the woods. And tell me more about this type of store. What do you do? And so this is kind of the direction that you can go, just to have conversations with people. And the other part of it that I often like to tell people is they look at what you and I do with the social engineering, where we're out to get sensitive information, we're out to get passwords, we're social security numbers. No, this is really just about having a conversation. Things like, where do you like to go in the Jeep? What types of things do you like to do? What are some of the models? What's your favorite color of the Jeep? The type of information that you're getting, completely irrelevant. The whole point is just that you're having a conversation with a stranger that you wouldn't normally have, that helps to build those communication skills.
That's fantastic. A lot of people. So first off, you're absolutely right. One of the things that I tell people is, look, do the exact thing that your parents said not to do. Go talk to strangers. Go talk to a lot of strangers, right? But also, when people try to get into whether it's offensive security, like let's say you want to do something like web app pen testing. Well, one of the first things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to cough up, the money for like a burp license, and then you're going to have to get a website that authorizes you to actually do it. You're going to have a laptop, an internet connection, a burp license, and some other stuff. If you want to do lock picking, well, you need some locks, you need some lock pick. But with social engineering, you need nothing. You could go to the grocery store. You need literally nothing. It's the cheapest, easiest way to possibly practice one of these skills, and you can practice infinitely. Not that there's infinite people to practice on, but there's enough people out there that it's functionally infinite to practice.
Yeah, you can definitely go to the grocery store and you find somebody standing in the aisle looking at some product, and you can ask their opinion on that product. You know, we can ask people where something else is in the store. There's all different types of things that you can talk to people about. Now, at the same time, it's going to be a little bit of a skill in some of those situations to not appear creepy. Now, there, because there might be some instances where that person thinks that you have other motives. And that's where it's really going to be important for you to just keep it completely on this superficial level and to know when to end this and get away, because you don't want to creep people out. The whole point really is to work on your communication skills, not to scare people.
Yeah, I mean that's a fantastic one. What I read a statistic recently that said something like, God, what was it? It was like of men under the this is specifically in the U.S. and I think it was something like men under the age of 40, or not 40, but 25. About 40% of them were uncomfortable talking to somebody like one to one. Totally okay with like texting and other things, but when it comes to just walking up to a random person, usually a girl, they they're really uncomfortable with doing it. It was like, well, but where did that go? Like, 10, 20, 30 years ago, that was just the norm, right? Like walking up to somebody and striking up a conversation. How did, do you see modernization where we kind of get away from human interaction? Does that affect like the current breed of social engineer? Does that make it harder for people to kind of get into this?
Well, I think it has to, because most of the communications that we do today are online. And it's so much easier to be able to communicate with random people online. And it's easier to get in, get out online with some of these communications. People just aren't doing the face to face anymore. So I have a teenage daughter where she spends all of her time in her room on her phone or on her computer, as she says, talking to friends. Like, you're texting with friends. You're not really talking. You're not seeing faces. You can't get that inflection. You can't get the tone in the conversation. All of that is lost. So hopefully we can get that back.
It- yeah, it's funny. When I've taken people out to practice social engineer in the real world for the first time, there are people who have like they're so uncomfortable. They will start sweating, they'll start shaking,
Mhm.
they'll get flushed, their ears or chest will turn bright red or something, and it's as if they've never talked to a human being before. It's the strangest thing to watch somebody who's perfectly functional, perfectly normal, and then you say, okay, see that person that you've never talked to, go say hi, and they can't, they just can't do it. Like they start shaking, they start talking as if like they don't know how to talk, their voice cracks. It's the weirdest thing to watch. And but I mean it is something you can get over, but it's still hilarious. I assume that you've had similar instances with trying to get people to get into social engineering and watching that behavior.
Oh, absolutely. I've taken classes on social engineering, and part of it, which I think this is probably something that you also do in your covert access team training classes, is you tell people to go out and talk to people like that. I've been part of that, where students in the class, once they learn that's what they have to do, they drop the class. They're like, no, I'm not doing this. It's like, did you not know what you were signing up for? You didn't know what you were getting into. And now, as soon as you have to just go talk to a stranger, you're ditching out of it. And it's interesting because if we reframe it, we can probably tell the people these are things that you've done before. When you go to the grocery store and you're checking out, do you just keep your head down and not interact with the cashier? Or if the cashier says hi, or have a great day, do you say anything back? Of course you do. Or at least I hope that you do. And that's a great start and a way that you can go with that. And it's often really just going to be about learning the small talk and what are the next things that you can go to.
the the thing that I've noticed more than anything else is that if I tell somebody, if I put like a Medico lock in front of somebody, so like I've given them like 5 minute quick training on like how lock picking works, and I put a really difficult lock in front of them. There is no expectation that they have that they will crack that lock, but at the same time, they have no fear of failure. So if okay, you've had 5 minutes of lock picking training. Here's a really difficult lock. You're not going to be able to do it, but try. And they'll try, they'll have no problem doing it, and they'll fail, and that's okay. But with social engineering, you'll teach somebody a few tricks, teach somebody something, and you're like, all right, there's a stranger, there's your hard lock, go do it, and it's just somehow it's just completely different to them. Yeah, it's weird, but that is so with social engineering, you have infinite free options to practice, and it's okay to fail. It's okay to walk out there and look like a fool. It's okay to screw up. It's just practice. It's just practice to, you can start off simple and just when I tell people how to do this, I say, look, you have to do it in baby steps. And the first baby step is just go up and say hi. Just that's it. That's the goal of what you're doing is go up to another human being and say hello or strike or anything, any introduction thing, and then move on from there. But yeah, it is
Yes.
interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Starting basic is definitely the way to go. And I really think that people are afraid what that stranger is going to think of them, to which I like to ask people, like, hasn't anybody ever come up to you and had a conversation with you and it was a stranger and the conversation probably seemed weird? And usually you get a look like, well, yeah, probably, I think. But notice you have never thought of that person again until this very moment when I brought that up. So you can go out and you can go be that person. Don't worry about it. When that conversation ends, they're never going to think about you again. So you can then go on to the next one. Don't worry about what they think about you because that's not going to last very long, if at all. Those are all things that we put in our own heads. And eventually, once you get a little bit better at this, you can actually make that a good conversation for the other person. So that stranger feels like, oh, I met somebody new today who was really nice. That was a great experience today.
Do you have any advice for people who are starting out on this, on like, this person would be easy to social engineer and this person will be very difficult? Like, can you spot that when you're like looking through a crowd of people? Or is there tricks or techniques, or is it just a complete random guess?
For me, it's going to be a complete random guess because to me, it's all that can't judge a book by the cover. That you really never know. And I've interacted with people that completely surprise you. You know, you are going to go through the crowds and look at people and sometimes think like, oh, that person's making eye contact with me. That person's smiling. But you really have no idea what's going on in their head. You have other people that have their head down in the crowd, and you might think, well, that person's angry. They have something. They got to be somewhere. They're a little too busy. But you never know. So I don't really think there's any specific tips or tricks. Is there any tips that you give people to be able to pick somebody out that is going to be easier than others?
So, I mean, you first off, what you just said was absolutely correct. Everybody is basically a blank slate in that you don't necessarily know, and you can misread people so hard. Somebody can look like the friendliest human being on earth, and you say hello, and they want to kill you. Like it can completely catch you off guard in that space. One of the things that I do to try and spot soft targets is, first, I try to recognize ahead of time what I think that person needs in that moment, and then attempt to make my opening line a way of giving that to them. So a paradox is often like the grumpy guy, right? Most of us, when we see the grumpy guy, we're like, oh, he's grumpy. I got to stay away from him. And that's fine. That's reasonable. But 9 times out of 10, what the grumpy guy really wants more than anything else is to vent. He wants to complain. He wants to, I'm upset, I'm pissed off, and here's why. If you can put your foot in the door and basically instantly validate why he's mad and give him an outlet to complain, you just made a really good friend. So things like that.
And you've probably had these same experiences when you're doing phone calls where you can't read somebody's face. You have probably 2, maybe 3 seconds based on how they answer the phone to know whether they are grumpy or happy. And just like you said, in order to give them what they want, I've done literally thousands of vishing phone calls. And you get that person that picks up the phone, which is basically a what do you want type of thing. And you can tell they're not having the greatest day. So from there, you can go in that direction of, well, one, getting out if you really need to, but also trying to figure out how that we can make their day better or let them vent versus the person that is super happy. Good morning. I'm here to help you. What can I do for you? And let's just play right into that. If that's somebody that wants to help us, let's let them help us and make them have a great day with that as well. So if you, that seems like a second level challenge that you can take things to with phone calls and being able to read people that way.
Oh, it is a funny paradox how younger generations today seem to have a harder and harder time dealing with other human beings face to face. But at the same time, social engineering is infinitely easier if you do it face to face. Like all of these things with social engineering that we talk about, where you're looking at body language, micro expressions, like all of the like what they're wearing, like is their hair disheveled? Do they have like a coffee stain on their shirt? Like all of these things are removed when you go to phone calls. And like you said, having a phone call social engineering is significantly orders of magnitude harder than doing it in person. Because in person, you can it is easier for if you want them to feel pity for you, you are ways you can do that. If you want them to feel like you're an authority figure, there are ways you can do that. But with over the phone, all of that is removed. You can't see what they look like. You can't see what they were looking like beforehand. You can't see how they're interacting with other people. Nothing. And so doing it over the phone is seriously challenging. And you said you've done thousands of these. I'd be very curious if you have any funny stories or any like specific ones that you're like, oh man, that one. Every time I think of a funny story, that's the one that I go to. Or
Well, and the other difference that you have with the phone calls from the in person is in person you can sometimes even choose your target. Where on the phone, the person that you're calling, you can't really say, well, give me someone else who's in a better mood. You really have to talk to that person who answers the phone. And the one phone call story that always comes to mind is we talk about how people who do the phone calls and the scam calls are able to get sensitive information. And before you start doing it, you often think, well, if somebody asked for my password, there's no way I would ever give that to somebody over the phone. And when you start doing them, like, oh, I'm never going to be able to talk somebody into giving me their password over the phone. But then the first time that you do it, it's like, holy crap, this actually works. And it really is just going to be about the pretext. Because if you just call somebody up and say, what's your password for the network? They're probably not going to give it to you. But if you call somebody up as the IT department and explain to them that the Windows patch didn't go through and it needs to go through right now, which is going to take about 2 to 3 hours of downtime on your computer in the middle of the day, they're probably going to think, I have work to do. I can't take 2 or 3 hours out of my day for this to happen. So you know what? I'm going to do you a favor. I will do this for you at 10 p.m. tonight when you're offline. How does that sound? I can make sure that I get that pushed through onto your computer. So just to confirm, your IP address is this. Yes, cool. Your username is this. Okay, yep. So in order for me to do that, I'll just have to put in your password, which then will get this all set, and you won't have that outage during the day. I'll take care of that for you tonight. You'll come in tomorrow, your computer will be all patched. We're out of your hair until the next time. So if you can just give me that information. And I remember I made literally hundreds of calls, and every single one was like, no, no, no. And then this one guy, I'm just going through asking him for this information. What's your username? Well, it's this. What's your password? Well, it's this. I'm like, did he seriously just give me? It really was just that easy. And the first time that I heard it, I was like, holy! I had to listen back to the recording after. I'd be like, that really happened. So that's probably the funny or interesting one that I go back to.
that's actually fantastic. I had a student once who, because of GDPR, we couldn't record conversations, and this young lady got exactly that. She got the credentials for somebody online, and about a second after it happened, she wasn't actively listening, and she just like there was that moment of like, what did he say? What? But you can't go back and say, I'm sorry. What did you say? Could you repeat your password? It's I'm sorry. I did. You just told me your credit card number, but I wasn't really listening. Could you say it again? So yeah, that kind of thing is hilarious. But out of curiosity, how? So you said that you've done this, hundreds of times, and then eventually you get somebody who falls for it. How often do you think in the wider world people actually fall for this?
Well, I don't know how often that they actually fall for it, but the explanation that I like to give to people is that it only takes one. Because when I'm doing these phone calls for a company, or whether it's phishing for a company, and sometimes the report will come back and be like, oh, we had a 0.6% success rate. The company like pats themselves on the back, like that's a super low success rate. Good for us. 99.4% of the people shut you down. And I say, well, out of that zero point 0.6, I got a username and a password. What does that do on your VPN? So now I can log in to your VPN. I'm inside your network with that one success. So for me, it's really less about how often that it works, but just the fact that it does work. And I don't, to your question about how often it happens out there, a lot of these are going to be about the volume. There's so much out there with the volume. We know with the phishing messages, those things are happening in the millions or billions per day. We're starting to see this with the text messages, which is also interesting that there's so many of those sent. And we also often hear that the phone calls are starting off digital and they're finding ways to get people to call them back, which just immediately builds the rapport, which probably makes it a whole lot stronger and better, especially in terms of getting things like credit card information.
That's a fantastic point of even if it's, 0.1% success rate, you're still a success.
It
And
is.
then it's a question of, I mean, so here's a way of thinking of it is that if you have one person in a company who falls for this, you might, as a company, say, well, yeah, but that's great because we had a 99.9% success rate. But what if that one person is an IT admin? Like, what if the credentials you stole was somebody important, right? Or what happens if you don't have? What if you haven't done your due diligence? What if you have a flat, physical network? What if you've added, too many people to be domain admins? What if you like, and on and on? Then it's just a simple network test.
Absolutely. And that's where I really like to pair together some of these social engineering tests with internal network testing, where lots of times when we do the internal network testing, we're doing that as an assumed breach, where we do have one set of low-level credentials, where it's just a regular domain user with no administrative privileges or anything like that, because we see that there are so many different vulnerabilities and privilege escalation paths with our like Active Directory certificate services, being able to get in and escalate that way. It really does only take that one set of credentials.
And out of curiosity, once you have access, suppose that you do have low level access of one set of credential, and you're inside on the network. How much damage can you do at that point, on average?
On average, you can do quite a bit. It's rare that I would say you can do nothing, but some of the things that I'm often able to do is escalate privileges all the way to the administrator level. Or one of my favorite stories that I like to tell about an internal network penetration test that I did many years ago is I was paired up with a relative newer pen tester with me. And the two of us decided, okay, we have 5 days on site at this company to see, where all the different vulnerabilities are, what type of access that we can get. And I offered up to the other person, I'm like, if you want, you can go and try to do the privilege escalation. You can go try to become a domain administrator. And she said, no, 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 I'll let you do that. So I spent the entire week trying to become the domain administrator. And the problem was that company had a PAM, a privileged access manager in place, where it was one of the best ones that I had ever seen, where it required basically two different people to log in and approve at the same time from approved computers only during a certain amount of time. So for me, that was nearly impossible for me to do the privilege escalation. But on Friday at the end of the week, when we got to go over everything with the client, first I showed like, you get the PAM in place. I didn't find any kind of weaknesses. I was not able to escalate my privileges. He said, that's great. I'm like, okay, now it's her turn. Well, what the thing that they missed was that with any level of access, it didn't even require any kind of login. They had open shares on the network. Now, really, what we care about when we're doing the testing is what is going to be the impact, what is the data that we can access. And usually we want to escalate privileges to get access to that data. But in this case, that wasn't necessary. All that was wide open, where she was able to find all their client information, all their financial information, all their clients' financial information. And showing that at the end of the week was an awesome learning experience to show privilege escalation is great, but it's not the only thing. Really, what we're there for is to show what that risk is and being able to find where those vulnerabilities are and to show the company these are going to be the areas where if somebody is in here, that they can do damage.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's about my experience as well. So the funny thing is that you just outlined a perfect route of using social engineering through a phone call to get one set of credentials, which you then use to get onto the network, which you then use to basically steal data, privilege escalate, lateral movement, whatever it is you need to do. And that is a very common attack vector. Like, it is really common to see that happen. But I guess my question is, so one question that I wanted to go back to, you had mentioned a moment ago about pretexting. Can you tell people what that is, and how often do you actually need to use it?
The pretexting is going to be like your reason for being there. It's going to be your story. And where we get those from comes from, we also described our OSINT. We never want to just Leroy Jenkins this and YOLO our way in, because that's almost never going to go well. So we want to have as much information as we possibly can in order to come up with a reason that makes sense to them. So when we're doing our OSINT, we're looking for, how do the employees dress? How do the employees act? When are they there? Who are their vendors? How do the vendors dress? Why are they there? Do they need appointments? And all these types of things in order to build this pretext or reason to be there. So how often do we want to have this? I would say we want to have this 100% of the time. And I've never had a client say, no, you cannot use a pretext. I'm guessing you've also had this experience where a client tells you, here are the pretexts that we want you to use. It's like, okay, we could go with the one of those, but how about if we actually base it on the OSINT? Let me do the OSINT and tell you what are going to be some of the more viable or likely pretexts, and can I use one of those instead?
Yeah. I very recently had somebody try and tell me what the pretext and the cover stories ought to be, which was, it was funny that you mentioned that. One of the questions that I get asked by clients sometimes, actually far more often than I think, is, given that we are all aware of this, in current year, we never think that somebody's going to be dumb enough to plug a USB into their laptop, right? Oh, I found a USB stick out in the parking lot. Nobody's going to be stupid enough to plug that in, right? But we know that there are lots of ways that you can weaponize those USBs to make them so curious that they absolutely will. So why does social engineering still work? Like, if I told anybody I'm a Nigerian prince, everybody would laugh
Right.
because they know the scam, but people still fall for it. So why do you think they still fall for this stuff?
Human nature. So we all have our instinctual human nature, whether that's going to be curiosity, whether that's going to be greed, whether that's going to be ego. And really, those are the types of things that people like you and I try to play upon when we're doing these tests. So you reference the USB stick, and people who have experience with this, who have looked into it, have probably heard that we're going to do things like write on the stick itself, um, budget for 2025, or maybe we're going to have raises, or we're going to have layoffs. Those are things that are going to cause some curiosity among people. And then once we get somebody to plug it in, a lot of times computers are set now to not auto run those types of things. So we do require that the person's going to have to take some kind of action. So maybe we have a macro in place that has the whole screen fuzzed out, and it tells them, you got to run this macro in order to see the bonuses, or to put in your password in order to see this types of thing. So those are some of the things that are, those are the pretexts that are going to work for that. But there's also a different direction that we can sometimes go with these USBs. And I was just giving a presentation this past week out in Chicago that included a USB story that was a little bit fun, where it involved doing the OSINT. It involved getting a pretext where I was going on site to a critical facility, and we went in. Basically, we figured out who their ISP was, their internet service provider. And we showed up and we said to them, are you having any kind of slowness in the internet? Which nearly 100% of the time you're going to get a yes. The internet's not going as quickly. That's exactly why we're here, because we heard that that was happening. So really what I need to do is to make sure that we got it fixed, because our techs have been out there working on it to make sure that it's all fixed. But we also want to make sure that you are getting the speed that you're paying for. So can you just plug in this USB and do a real quick speed test and ensure that it's going to be the speed that you're paying for with this? Now, in my experience, the one time that I was able to do this with somebody, I went to hand her the USB to plug it in. Surprisingly, she got up from her desk and said, "You do it." To which I was just like, "Oh no." So fortunately, the USB that I had, what I did is I created an exe file that when you ran it, it just said, "You have full internet speed." That was the only thing that it did, since it was really just intended to be a proof of concept, so that I could show that somebody let me run that on their computer and get the screenshot and all that for the report. but these are some of the things that we can do to build that pretext to play on some of these concerns that other people might have. Where in that situation, she wanted to make sure that she was going to get the internet speed, and I presented myself as the internet service provider, as the expert that was here to help.
That's a fantastic story. That's actually really funny. And the fact that she wanted you to do it is not surprising, but still hilarious.
Yeah, she
Um,
probably didn't trust that she would do it correctly, not knowing that you
yep.
just plug it in. That's all I care about.
Yep. Yep. So, what do you have any kind of go-to social engineering tricks? Do you have like your long bag of tricks of things that you'll pull or things that you'll do? A lot of people will default to like what they're best at. Do you have any like best things that you prefer to use when you're social engineering?
It's it's largely going to be based on what we find with the OSINT in order to fall back onto that. But one of the things that I also really like to focus on is that it's really important to do an area of something that you know about. Like, for example, if we do the OSINT and we find out that they have this type of generator on site, well, I could probably go in there as the generator repairman. But what happens if there actually is an issue and I need to show up and start repairing their generator? I might electrocute myself. So that's not going to go well. Same thing maybe with an elevator repairman. I thought about using that for a recent engagement until I saw that the elevators were right near the security desk. And I'm like, well, if I need to actually act like I'm inspecting or doing something with these elevators and I get no clue what I'm doing, and the security guard is standing 10 feet away, this might not go well. So, really, the direction that I try to go to is going to be something with the IT department, which that type of thing can go well. Or maybe even some areas, I often like to be a supervisor. I think that's one that worked well for me recently, where I needed to get into a large corporate building recently. And one of the things that I did was, I did all the OSINT and that reconnaissance that you talk about, where you say, start off from a distance, gradually work yourself a little bit closer, where I was able to kind of figure out when the people were coming and going. And I found out that they did have an outsourced cleaning crew that came in at night. And one of the things that I did was I found out that I saw that they were all coming in probably about 5:15, 5:20 in the evening. And I got close enough to the front door when they came in to see that they were required to sign into a book, and the security guard handed them a badge. So one of the things that I did was I figured out who their cleaning crew company was, created my own badge from that company, and then showed up about 20 minutes before, shortly before 5 p.m., went up to the guard and said, I'm from their cleaning company, and I'm doing a surprise inspection to make sure that they are doing their job, to make sure that you, as the client, are getting exactly what you're paying for. So I just need to go around and make sure and supervise what they are doing, but don't let them know that that's what's happening, because obviously, if they do, they're going to do their best job. So don't let them know where I'm just going to be roaming around. And the guard said, here's your badge. So I thought that was an interesting one to use as well.
That's fantastic. I love the supervisor role thing. That's a really really good cover.
It
That's
doesn't
actually
require any kind of technical ability either.
nope
You're just
nope
supervising.
nope. And as we've all known, the supervisor is often the person who was on the job so long ago that they don't really remember how to do it right. So you can't really ask them to well, you show me how to do it. Like, oh man, I haven't ran an in map in like 2 decades. I don't even know what that is. Yeah, it's yeah. So that's actually I really like that cover. That's when you're I had this someone tell me this a long time ago. When you're trying to impersonate a construction crew, don't impersonate a construction worker and impersonate the supervisor, because everybody will everybody will like clear out and nobody will want to be around you or anything, because it's like yeah. So it's
And you're just from the home office.
exactly, yeah, exactly. You're just you're not local. Yeah, that's actually a fantastic thing. And you had mentioned multiple times, which I absolutely agree with, where you say first do the OSINT, use the OSINT and the data that you've collected to create a great pretext or cover story, and then use that combined with what you're good at and your knowledge to use that to get inside. And I actually really really like that. And that's honestly going back a step to the layer 8 conference. That's honestly that's a fantastic rationale as to why those two things are paired together. You've got the OSINT, you've got the social engineering, because yeah, I can't just show up at your facility and be like, hi, I'm here to clean the pool, and they say, well, we don't have a pool.
Right. Yeah, and I actually have another fun story about where the OSINT really fit in extremely well, where I was tasked with trying to see how deep I could get into multiple bank branches,
Mm,
which you would often think like, how can some stranger walk in off the street and get access to a bank vault or get access to the server room and these types of things? And this is where the OSINT really played in. So what I did was I did the OSINT on this bank and found out that they were doing an advertising campaign with a local athlete celebrity. And the advertising campaign was everywhere for this bank. So what I did was I got a jacket from that athlete's team and walked into the bank branch one day looking all official. And people can't see me, but I'm just like this middle aged, gray haired guy with glasses. So I look completely harmless. Go up to the bank manager and say, hey, we're going to be doing this new advertising campaign with the athlete where we want the athlete to come into one of the bank branches and we're going to film it right here. So what we need to do is I'm going around to a whole bunch of branches today. I'm looking for the best one where we're going to film this. So do you mind if I just look around a little bit? And the bank manager's like, no, absolutely. Go right ahead. Look around. I would love to have that person come here because it's like a really famous person in the city. And as I'm walking around, I'm just kind of taking pictures of things. I'm going under desks and taking pictures. And then eventually I'm just like, okay, when the film crew is all done, they're really particular about getting it in quickly. So one of their requests is that they can plug in and upload the footage immediately. So do you have a place where we can do that? And one of the places is like, yeah, we have the server room here. I'm like, well, I really need to look to make sure that it's going to work to see if it's going to be compatible. The guy says, sure, go right ahead. Opens up the server door, lets me in. I get pictures of the whole server rack. And I did this multiple times throughout the day. And at one point, I also had a partner with me. And here's one of the tricks that we do. And I'm sure it's something that you've done when you've been paired up is that we intentionally distract people, especially when there's multiple of us and one of them is
right.
we are going to try to get us separated where one of us can then just go off while our partner is talking up the person. So it was kind
Sure.
of interesting where my partner was talking and we figured out that the escort that we had, so they were trying to do it right. They were escorting us around the building, but we
Mm,
found out that the escort was a huge fan of this professional athlete. So they were asking
nice.
all kinds of questions, which my partner actually, I don't think, knew a lot about the athlete, but he's like, yeah, he's a great guy, does all this stuff for the community, loves working with your bank. And the escort was just like, this is great. Meanwhile, I'm walking away and I see this door that's just marked server room, which I was then able to get into, close the door behind me, full server racks, lots of photos of all this kind of stuff where literally we were just a couple guys who walked off the street, had a jacket with that team logo on it, but based on the OSINT that we were able to find that local athlete had the actual advertising campaign with that bank, it all fit, it all made sense. And interestingly, while we were standing there in the lobby talking to one of the managers at one time, you've probably seen this at some banks where they have video screens and they were cycling through some of the different initiatives and the advertising campaign came up on the TV and like, hey, there's our guy. So it kind of fit in with the rapport.
That's fantastic. I love that story. That is an excellent, excellent story. I mean, you're not wrong. Getting into bank branches is surprisingly not as difficult as people would think, but that is an excellent method of getting in and excellent OSINT. I really, really like that. That was clever. That's the funny thing about this job is that there's no there's no real right or wrong way to do it, and every person you talk to is going to have a completely different idea, or how they're going to go about it, or what pretext they're going to use, or it's fascinating to listen to people's stories on this because when you mention this, like how do you get into bank branches, I immediately thought of things I've done, things I would do. That is not something I would ever have thought of. Like I would never have thought of like, oh, I'm gonna use this sports initiative thing. It's yeah, but I love that story.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say there's no right or wrong way, but also interesting on a completely different job, also for a bank. One of the employees told me I was doing it wrong. I think because it was a little too successful. Where we did the OSINT, we found out who their pest exterminator was. So one of the things that we did was we bought the sprayers, filled it up with water, and wore one of those big white paint vests and we're standing outside and we're doing all the spraying on the outside and then eventually we go inside and tell the bank manager like we're here, we're your exterminator, we need to make sure that there's no sign of any pests inside the building, which the first bank branch we went to let us in everywhere. We made sure went into the vault, went behind the ATM, all that kind of stuff. Second place we went to, the bank manager was like, "No, I'm not letting you in. I'm going to call the police." So of course, then we're like, "We're out of here." Went to the third one, and the person in charge of facilities immediately met us at that place, at the third branch. Comes right out and starts yelling at me that I'm doing it wrong, that he thought that we were actually robbing the bank, that we can't wear this whole suit, and that we can't claim that we're actually from the company that they use. He said, if you had said that it was a non-existent company, that would have been fine. I'm just like, well, that's that's not how this works. So I thought it was interesting when you said there's no right or wrong way. Well, in this client's mind, that was the wrong way.
Okay, to be fair, there is no right or wrong way, but clients will sometimes think that there is. It's yes, that's a very very important distinction, and yeah, so clients will there's always that one person who thinks that you're doing things incorrect, and humorously, oftentimes the reason that is social is a form of social engineering where it's their job on the line. You know, when somebody calls you up and they say, "Hey, can you run a pen test or social engineering engagement or something?" and you knock it out of the park, there will likely be somebody who will come out and they'll give you a lot of pushback, and then you find out later it's because basically you made them look bad.
Or you've probably gotten this feedback as well, where that was just luck. That door is not normally unlocked, so that doesn't count. Remove everything that was related to that unlocked door. It's like, no.
Yep, yep. That's yeah. I mean, that's the thing though, is that every aspect of social engineering has a luck factor, right? But even every aspect of physical pen testing has a luck factor, right? Like, I mean, it's when you pick a lock, there's always the probability somebody's going to round the corner and catch you. When
Or you
you
break it.
are yeah, or you break it, right? Like, yeah, I mean, there's always these possibilities. So luck always plays a role in it. So when somebody says like, "Well, you got too lucky," it's like, come on, man, what is that?
And that's one of the interesting points where we mentioned that I have the Layer 8 podcast and I have 130 episodes. And one of the things that I remember early on when I talked to social engineers, and they would have that unlocked open door on the side, and I'm like, okay, you were just lucky. But I heard that over and over and over again. Eventually, what I learned is it's less luck and more awareness and experience to look for those types of things. And I think you probably do the same thing when you're out and about. Even if you're not on an engagement, maybe you're just grocery shopping, you might look around and be like, oh, if I was testing this place, I noticed that that is open. I noticed that we just get experience of looking for the things that are the weaknesses. So sometimes it's less luck and more just the experience and the awareness.
Oh yeah, there's like the amount of times that I've just pulled pictures, vacations, travel, grocery stores, wherever, and it's like, oh, that's going in the picture deck of things for future classes or courses or something else because of some stupid thing that people are doing. But yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's practice is what makes this proficient, and you have to practice. But so going back a step, you mentioned a lot of OSINT. Do you have a preferred like OSINT methodology, tool set, thing that you do? Like, is it just Google dorking, or what is it that you prefer to do?
For me, it really is going to be about the Googling and using the company site, building. I like to build profiles of the employees. One of my favorite ways to do this is either going to be LinkedIn or you're probably familiar with ZoomInfo, where ZoomInfo is a great site for getting, I think it's 125, 150 employee names. And if you can then use something like hunter.io to figure out what's the email format, all these are going to be ways that you can build this up. And then you can cross list this with the social media to be able to find people. If there's, I don't really have a great deal of luck in a professional setting with social media. For me, it's really going to be about LinkedIn and the company site itself. Going through press releases is often another way to find some of this. Sometimes some of the corporate information that they have to report things is some of the more common ways that I build up that information.
Yeah, that's okay. That makes perfect sense. And honestly, that's a very straightforward methodology. That's actually that's interesting.
Now, if
What?
we're doing something that's going to be more of an attack profile,
Mhm.
that's where we're going to go a little bit deeper in terms of there's often things whether you're hired to make the phone calls against a company, make emails, or even do the covert entry. Th- those are probably a direction where I'll do one level of OSINT. But then there are also sometimes where a company might say, we have these high level executives, tell us everything that you can possibly find about them. And for that, I will probably go a good deal deeper, where I do then go into the social media. And depending on what you find, you can include things like pictures of their home, let them know that we know who your family is. Pictures of your home, family information is less relevant for phishing, for phone calls, for covert entry. But if it's in an attack profile that you get hired to do, we'll go to that level of depth.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that people don't even consider often is that, I mean, well, one, people put way more information on the internet than people think. But two, yeah, if you're, like you said, well, actually, for anybody who doesn't know, could you explain the difference between just like a typical social engineering slash intelligence gathering or OSINT investigation and an actual attack vector on a person or company?
For the latter part, that we are trying to get as much information as possible, where then we can do things like spear phishing or specific phone calls, where we're able to build up a profile that is going to be extremely believable. So instead of sending out something that is going to be relatively generic that you typically see in a lot of the phishing types of testing, where it might be, here is your monthly HR update. That's something that we typically see for phishing. But if we are able to figure out something that is a lot more specific, maybe something that's a conversation that you were able to find between executives at a company, or something that you see that the executive just bought the new boat. So maybe now that we see that that executive has some kind of involvement with a boat club, or we see that executive loves to donate their time to a nonprofit charity. We see that they've been at a fundraiser. Well, maybe we can send them an email thanking them for the fundraiser, thanking them for being there, and ask, can you do something more at the next one? Here's the schedule. Can you sign up for one of these time slots? Can we make some time to talk to you, and give them a phone call about that charity that they've been involved with? It sounds kind of mean since you're involving nonprofit charity types of things, but that's really what they're hiring you to do, is to show, these are what the malicious actors are going to do. So really let them know what is going to be the potential attack vectors. And often the next question that we get from there is, well, should we delete all of that information? Should we tell our people, delete all their social media, don't put anything online, delete their LinkedIn? To which I often tell them, no, you don't have to do that. If you want to wipe yourself off the internet, good luck. You can try to do that. But really, what my advice for people who have that out there is really just the awareness. Know that these are the different types of attacks that are going to come. And that's why you're hiring me to do this, to give you the awareness of what's out there, and to give you kind of that awareness of what the bad person is thinking, because our brains can go to that bad place. So if you have that awareness, you're going to be in a much better place. Where I often tell people, I'm not a very private person online. I have a lot of information out there. You can find pictures of the inside of my house. I'm aware of that. So if somebody comes up to me with something that are one of those pictures, I'm going to have a pretty good awareness that they're trying to do something bad. And I'm going to then go to my V's, my verification validation, on what they're actually looking for. So if you have that awareness of what is possible, which is great through the testing, that can help to make you more secure.
That's an excellent point. And you're absolutely right, because that's a question that inevitably comes up is like, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to just scrub everything? Like delete all my pictures? Like, come on. And you're right. I mean, just being aware, like, look, you don't have to do that. Just be aware of what you're doing. It's just trade-offs, right? Like here are the risks that you're doing when you do this, and it's okay. There's no problem. Life itself is a risk. So, it's just one of those things that as long as you're okay with it and you're aware of it, that's perfectly reasonable. But that does get me into one question, and I get asked this all the time, and I'm really curious to hear your take on it. What is the moral red line for you when you're doing a social engineering attack? When you're doing this kind of thing, is there things that you won't do, even if they're in scope? Because sometimes clients will be like, no, anything goes, right? Like you can do anything you want, and they don't really think about it. So when you're doing social engineering, when you're doing these kinds of things, is there anything that you're like, I'm not going to go there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there are definitely red lines for that. For example, I did a social engineering engagement where I had to go into a water facility, and it was a place for the municipality where all their clean water for the whole town was. And my point of contact said, "Well, for one of the flags, we want to see if you could pour white powder into the tank. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like for one, this is a government facility. I don't know if there's armed guards. I'm not even carrying a white powder into that facility. So we eventually settled on, well, if I can just take a photo of those tanks, is that good enough? And they said, yeah, that's good enough. But as far as the red line and interacting with people, one of the things that I really like to do is I like to get in, do the job, and leave without them ever thinking about me again. So I am not going to make somebody feel bad. I am not going to do anything negative. I'm not going to do anything threatening, anything that's going to cause fear. If anything, I'm just going to try to make this as positive an engagement for people as possible. So I'm always trying to be helpful during these and trying to be the gray man who just disappears into the background. So there is that red line for me where I'm not going to do anything that's going to make somebody feel worse for having met me.
That's fantastic. That's a really I get asked that question all the time. I actually agree 100% with what you just said. Try to turn it into a positive and try not to try to leave in the way that people don't think about you afterwards. I think
And
that's a
and what and one of the reasons for that is quite often we do get caught or we do debrief on the spot. I had one engagement where I was completely successful going through the facility. And one of the other interesting flags that we had was they asked us if we could copy an employee's badge. So we had brought Flipper Zero in order to do the copying. And after being completely successful, getting completely through the facility, getting access to everything that they wanted us to, we decided, let's see how far we can push this. So we sat down in the break room. And we're sitting down in the break room having a cup of coffee. Employees are coming in and out. We're starting up little conversations, but most of them are just walking out. And we started up a conversation with this one woman who, was on vacation the previous week. We're talking about her vacation, where she went, and we're telling her all about our vacations. And then eventually I just said to her, I'm like, well, I think at one point she asked, who we were and what we were there for. And we told her that we're from the landlord and we're coming around making sure that everything is up to par and all inspected properly. But one of the other things that the landlord wanted us to do is that they recently upgraded the badges. So, do you have one of the new badges? And of course, she looks at me all confused. She's like, I have no idea if my badge is new. I'm like, okay, well, we have this device that we can test to ensure that you have one of the new badges. And she's like, okay. She walks over and she hands over the badge to us, which we put the flipper on. And the flipper does its sort of thing. We walk away, all that, and a few minutes later, she comes up to me and she says, "Who are you again?" And I explained it, and she's like, "How did you get in here?" I'm like, "Oh, the door was just open." She's like, "That's not how this works. You need to go now." So a little while later, I called the contact and I said, "I think we're busted." And she's like, "Yep, you are busted," and said, "Come on back in." And the person that we had interacted with was standing right there with my contact. And I asked him, like, well, what set it off? And she's like, well, that little toy thing that you were saying, like, that didn't seem real. Like, we explained to her, well, it actually is real, but we totally understand since the flipper is like this little orange tool looking thing. And then once we explained what was actually happening and how that she had let us, quote unquote, copy the badge, she felt all embarrassed. To which we had to say, no, no, you did this right. You did catch us. You did stop us. So it was good that as we were having that conversation with her, there was no goal to embarrass her. There was nothing that we did to create a pretext of fear, to make her angry or act like we were angry. It was all an experience that by the time that we were done and explained to her, even though you let us copy the badge, you did eventually realize that something there wasn't right. And you went to the security department, which is what got us caught and ended the engagement. What we eventually figured out is that she is going to be one of the most valuable employees to that company because immediately she was already talking to other employees around us, explaining what happened, how she caught us, and what types of things to look for. That is exactly what you want. She wasn't so embarrassed that this happened that she wasn't talking. She was explaining to everybody else, this is what they did, this is what I looked for, and this is how I stopped them. So that's exactly what you want, is not somebody that's all upset, embarrassed, or angry. You want somebody that is going to tell the story and to help to make the company more secure.
Yeah, you literally empowered her. That's a fantastic way. That's a fantastic thing to give to that company and to that employee. And you're right, that employee is almost assuredly going to be their biggest asset now for security.
And isn't that exactly the story that you want to use anytime that you talk about an employee that didn't do the right thing during one of these engagements and the your point of contact's like, well, we're going to fire that person. It's like, no, you just spent all this money basically to train that person. That person now knows how this works. Because if you fire that person, you're going to bring in somebody else who hasn't gone through this, who hasn't seen this before, and now makes you vulnerable again. Where you just hired me to go through this and train that person indirectly, where now they know what the social engineering looks like, and they're going to share that with other people.
That's an excellent goal for what you do, of actually of empowering the employees, getting them aware of what it is, how this works, the tools that are used, how to spot the bad guy, encouraging them, or just letting them go to security and be like, hey, that guy, something was off about that guy, right? And because if how what I mean, even if only 10% of a company's employees were like that, it would be really hard to break in. It'd be really hard to breach if even every 10th employee you pass by in the hall said, hey, wait a minute, I don't know you. Like, you seem off.
Right, because how many people do we pass by? Probably dozens, possibly hundreds. So, like you said, if it was 1 in 10, 1 in 20, you're going to pass by somebody. And I remember I was recently doing an engagement where one of their policies was that anytime you're in the building, you need to have your employee badge showing. So I was like, okay. Because one of the things that I like to tell people is that my job is less testing people and more testing the policies, the procedures, and the understanding of training. So really at that point, once they told me they had that policy, I wanted to see if people were going to understand it, know it, and follow the procedure. I put my fake badge away and just started walking around. And I remember multiple times just walking through the hall, making eye contact with people, saying, good morning, how are you doing? And at one point, I decided to even push it further, where this was like a cube farm where everybody's in their cubicles. And they had a great view out of like the fourth floor window. So I decided I'm just going to go stand at the window, which was literally right next to somebody's cube next to their desk, and stand there and look out the window and enjoy the view. To which the person sitting in their cube 3 feet away says, can I help you? And I was like, no, I'm just enjoying the view. And she said, okay, enjoy it. Without ever checking, I had no badge exposed. So like you said, I passed so many people. I tested so many people that day by hiding my badge to see, and they didn't follow the policy. They didn't follow the procedures. So is that a question of the training? That's probably the case. And it's going to be an instance where that company needs to do more of the training to make sure that they understand the why. So
But
that'd be
what?
a good one for them.
Well, yeah, but you just described exactly why you should do why what you do is so important. Like, that company that you just described, they had all the compliance stuff. You have to have a badge, you have to have this, you have to have that. They had the defense side. All right, here are the policies in place that you need to implement, but it's never tested, right? Because obviously, when it is tested, it fails. So that's a fantastic rationale as to why you do what you do and why it's valuable to have you come in and do this.
Absolutely. You can go back to the fourth grade teacher that teaches multiplication. Did the students absorb it? You have no idea if they absorb it if you never tested them. So we need to do the same thing with these other things, because the other thing that we need to remember is that Bob in accounting, he's there to do accounting. He's not there to look for badges. That's not his job, but we're asking to make it part of his job. So we really need to make this as seamless or as frictionless as possible for him. And another quick story that I like to use is that I worked for this one company where part of my job was to do the security debrief or brief for new employees. So anytime that you do onboarding at a company, you go through filling out all the paperwork, learning about HR and everything. But there was also like this 1 hour that the security team would come in and talk about security issues for the company. And one of the things that we told them was that in our company, we also did have the requirement that every employee, while in the building, needed to have their badge exposed so that everybody can see it. And also, we told them that every person in this company is empowered to stop anybody in the hallway that does not have their badge exposed. So we told them all of that. And then there was this one session where a new employee walked out of that training and saw somebody in the hallway without their badge exposed. So he walked up to him and said, hi, I'm sorry to have to do this, but I see that you don't have your badge out. Can I just ask to see your badge? And the man looked at him with a great big smile and said, yes, you can. Pulled his badge out. Turned out he was the CEO of the company. And a few minutes later, he sends out an email to everybody in the company and explains, we had this new employee came out of the security training that we do where we tell you you are empowered to stop anybody in the company who does not have their badge exposed, because remember, our policy is that anybody in the building must have a badge, whether that's an employee badge, a guest badge, a vendor badge, a contractor badge, anything like that must be exposed. And this person stopped me and asked to see it. That is exactly the behavior that I want to see. So if anybody ever asks to see your badge, show it to them. If you ever see somebody that doesn't have their badge, ask them to see it. If they don't have one, escort them to security. So when we got that email from the CEO, who are we to say, I'm not ever going to get angry at somebody for asking to see my badge when the CEO did exactly the behavior? So we had that culture of security literally from the top down. And that's really the culture that I tell people you want to have that in your company.
Yeah, that absolutely 100%. I mean, that's if your employees, even if a small percentage of your employees are security aware, your internal physical security just drastically increased. But here's a question for you. Why do you think that people don't? So everybody knows the policy, everybody's aware of it, and you see something going on right in front of you. Why do you think most more people don't actually go up and say, "Hey, why are you, who are you?"
Because people are conflict averse. We don't like conflict. We're just afraid that that person is going to give some kind of attitude, be like, well, of course I work here. I'm here all the time. That's not really the attitude that they want to get, which is exactly why I tell that story that the email came from the CEO who said, you need to show your badge. You need, and that's also why I described that we all thought like, well, if the CEO is going to have this attitude of, yes, I need to show my badge and not turn it on the person that asked, who are we to give anybody any kind of attitude about it as well? So I really think that it's companies that don't have that culture or don't know they have that culture of security and openness is why people don't want to ask for that.
Honestly, I think you're absolutely right on that. That's, I mean, yeah, we are very much averse to any aspect of pain, whether it's social, physical, or anything else. And yeah, that's actually a fantastic way of putting that. Um, Patrick, so I wanted to return real quick. You've got a conference coming up. I really encourage everybody listening to this to go get a ticket, attend it. But first things first, you have hundreds of war stories. You've been doing this for a really long time. I assume that you will be at the conference, that people will get to meet you, talk to you, and have their own uh, opportunity to pick your brain about your war stories and all this kind of stuff at the conference.
Oh, I would love that. I will definitely be at the conference, and I'm very easy to see. One of the things that I do with both myself and all the other volunteers is we wear traffic cone orange. So we stand out. At hacker conferences, lots of people wear black. So I figured we need to do something that stands out. So I will be there. I'll be flying around trying to make everything go smoothly while wearing my bright orange, trying to disappear in the background, like I mentioned earlier, trying to be a gray man while wearing orange.
So, given that it is a social engineering conference, do you encourage attendees to try and social engineer you?
That would be great. No, and by social engineering me, let's go back to what we said about how to learn it. It's communication. It's about having conversations. I would love for people to have conversations. Um, I love meeting people at the conference. And like I said, that's where we really start building up our people networks. And by meeting people, the podcast has been awesome, but also meeting people at the conference face to face is really the best way to do our human networking.
Absolutely, 100%. You have to get out there. You have to meet people face to face. Um, Patrick, where can people go to buy tickets or learn more about the conference?
People can go to layer8conference.com. So again, the conference is going to be on Saturday, June 14th. It's $50 and we even include lunch. So your food is included. There's going to be all kinds of fun swag. We got an awesome Blinky badge. So if you like Blinky badges, we got one of those. Only $50. And if you're a college student, it's free. I've always wanted to support college students. So if you go to college, you're even high school, you can come to the conference for completely free. Just go to layer8conference.com. You can send me an email at patrick@layer8conference.com. If you're the college student, I'll send you a ticket.
Okay, well, so fundamentally, if you're a college student, you definitely have no reason not to go. Like you've literally got a free social engineering conference where you can meet, exciting people and hear conferences and talks, and yeah. So there's really no reason for you not to go to this.
And like we said, you're going to be building up your network. And one of the other fun things that I've realized now that I've gotten older in my career is that all the people that I met very early that were my age very early, we've grown up together. And now we've moved on to bigger roles in the community and that we all know each other. So when you first show up and you're new to these types of things, you might see these people that you hear all about everywhere in the industry, get intimidated by them, and that's fine. Those are experts in the industry. They've done their things. So the thing that I like to tell people that are new, get to know all the other new people because those are the people that are going to grow up in the industry with you. And 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're going to also be the ones that are up on the stage, be those world famous people just like you might be. And when you can go up there with them, you're going to grow with them. So don't really always focus on the big names that you see at these things. Get to know the other people that are in the same place as you because you're all going to move up in this industry together.
That's a fantastic. It's a really, really good point. That yes, that's honestly that's actually a point that I hadn't considered, but you're absolutely right on that. Everybody is going to grow up. They're all going to improve. They're all going to gain experience and skills. They're going to go on to various jobs and roles, and yeah, meet them now. Meet them now before they're famous.
Absolutely. And you'll be able to say you knew them when, they'll be able to say they knew you when, and when they're the CEO of a company and you're looking for a job, that might be the person that you hit up because they remember when you were there with them when they were also a 25-year-old just all nervous at the Layer 8 conference trying to figure out what's next.
Exactly. All right, Patrick. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you wanna discuss before we call it over or we wrap it up?
No, I think this has been awesome. It's been a privilege to be a part of your podcast. Thank you so much.
It's a privilege having you, man. You've got an excellent podcast. I strongly encourage anybody who's interested in OSINT in social engineering to listen to the Layer 8 podcast. Definitely attend the conference. All right, everybody. Patrick, thanks for being here, and hopefully people will see you at the conference coming up in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much, Brian.